Daniel and Emily Parker live in a beautiful small house in the suburbs, where they and their 6-year-old daughter Sophie build a happy life. Daniel is a software engineer who often works remotely, and Emily is an elementary school teacher, loved by her students for her dedication and enthusiasm. Sophie is the heart of the family, a lively, adorable girl with sparkling blue eyes and a rich imagination. The Parker family has long wanted to get a dog. Daniel raised dogs as a child and understands the special bond a dog brings to a family. Emily also loves animals, but is always concerned about the responsibility of caring for them. After much discussion, the two decided that it was time for Sophie to have a 4-legged friend to keep her company. On a sunny weekend, they visited the nearest rescue shelter in search of a suitable dog. When entering the camp, barking echoed everywhere, but in a quiet corner, a shiny yellow Labrador stood quietly looking at them. Rescue camp staff introduced a dog named Max, about 3 years old, rescued from a family who could not take care of him. Max is obedient, intelligent, and especially loves children. When Sophie walked closer, Max immediately wagged his tail and lowered his head to let her pet him. From first sight, Sophie and Max were strangely connected. Emily smiled when she saw Sophie smiling brightly. "I think this is our dog, Daniel," she said. Daniel nodded in agreement. Max was sent home that day, bringing with him a new necklace and lots of hope for his family. In the first days, Max quickly integrated into Parker family life. It clings to Sophie, always following her whenever she runs in the garden or draws in the living room. Max seemed to understand every word Sophie said, sometimes tilting his head as if listening, then suddenly wagging his tail when she giggled. Daniel and Emily constantly admire Max's intelligence and affection. Every afternoon, the family often goes for a walk in the park near their house. Sophie always ran ahead with Max, while Daniel and Emily walked slowly behind, chatting. Days with Max become much more fun and lively. A picture of a happy family cannot lack the silhouette of a loyal Labrador dog. Although Max is very docile and friendly during the day, when night falls, he acts that makes Daniel and Emily wonder. From the first night, Max regularly patrolled Sophie's room. At first, Daniel thought it was just a dog's natural protective instinct. "He's just making sure Sophie's safe," he reassured Emily when she noticed Max standing in front of Sophie's door, growling softly. However, this behavior repeats every night. Max never sleeps in his own bed, but always chooses to lie right in front of Sophie's door. Sometimes it growls lowly, like it's wary of something the family can't see. A few times, Max scratched the door gently, or whined as if to call someone's attention. Emily started to feel worried. "Do you think Max can sense what's wrong?" she asked Daniel one night. "Maybe," Daniel replied, even though he wasn't sure himself. "But he loves Sophie very much. I think he's just on guard duty." Sophie didn't pay attention to that. To her, Max is the best friend in the world. "Max is my knight," she told her mother. "It always protects you from the monsters in your dreams." Emily smiled at her daughter's innocence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. As time passes, Max's strange behavior becomes more apparent. One night, Daniel woke up in the middle of the night because he heard a growl that was louder than usual. He left the room and saw Max standing at Sophie's door, his hair standing on end, his bright eyes staring into space in the darkness. "What's wrong, Max?" Daniel whispered, moving closer. Max didn't turn to look at him, but continued to stare at the door. Daniel opened Sophie's door to check. The little girl was still sleeping soundly, clutching her favorite teddy bear. Max slowly walked in, walked around the room, sniffed everywhere before returning to lie at the door as before. Daniel returned to his room, but an uneasy feeling began to ripple. He couldn't explain why Max was behaving like that, but he told himself that maybe Max was just being overly cautious. He decided not to tell Emily about this, not wanting her to worry more. Even though the strange nights continue, the Parker family still loves Max unconditionally. It is an indispensable part of their lives. But underneath the warm family picture, a mystery gradually grows, like a darkness hidden behind the happy light. Every time Daniel looks at Max standing in front of Sophie's door, he can't help but wonder, what is Max protecting his daughter from? And why only at night, when the whole family is asleep, does Max act like that? The next morning, Daniel woke up early to check the video from the security camera. With a cup of coffee in hand, he sat in front of his computer screen, fast-forwarding through the hours when Sophie slept peacefully. At first, everything looked completely normal. Sophie slept soundly, clutching her teddy bear. But around 2 a.m., Daniel discovered something strange. In the video, Max is lying in front of Sophie's room, growling softly. Suddenly, he stood up, his eyes staring at the corner of the room near the window. Daniel zoomed in on the video, but saw nothing but faint darkness. Max began growling harder, to the point where his voice echoed clearly through the camera. What sent chills down Daniel's spine was the image of Sophie starting to move strangely in her sleep. The girl did not wake up, but her mouth moved as if she were talking. Although no sound came out, Daniel could see Sophie was conversing with someone. Max barked loudly and ran around Sophie's bed, but she remained motionless, as if caught in a strange state. As he fast-forwarded to 3 a.m., Daniel noticed something even scarier. Sophie suddenly sat up, eyes still closed, and pointed toward the corner of the room. Max barked madly, rushing in that direction as if trying to chase away something invisible. Daniel couldn't take his eyes off the screen, the feeling of fear growing. The following mornings, Sophie began waking up with scratches on her hands and face. When Emily asked, she just shook her head. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe I fell in my dream." But both Emily and Daniel knew that these injuries could not have been just a minor accident. Daniel decided to talk to Sophie directly. "Do you remember anything strange in your dream, Sophie?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Sophie looked at her father with worried eyes. "I saw someone standing in the corner of the room, Dad. They didn't do anything, just looked at me, but I was very scared." Sophie's answer made Daniel feel like his blood was freezing. He did not say anything more, but determined to investigate further. Over the following nights, Max's behavior became uncontrollable. He barked all night, sometimes even scratching at Sophie's door, as if he wanted to rush inside. Daniel had no choice but to sit outside Sophie's room, quietly watching the cameras and trying to understand what was going on. Meanwhile, Emily begins to feel tired and anxious to the point of losing sleep. She constantly checked on Sophie at night, only to find her daughter still sleeping peacefully, but her face becoming increasingly pale. "Daniel, we can't go on like this," she said, almost crying. "There's something wrong in this house." Daniel nodded. "I will do everything to find out the truth," he said, his voice filled with determination. The clues he gathered from the camera only made things more mysterious. The moments when Max growled and barked were all directed towards the same corner of the room. Daniel decided to install a thermal camera to check for any signs that the naked eye could not see. When night came, Daniel and Emily sat together in the living room, watching new video from the thermal camera. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw a shadowy figure appear in the corner of Sophie's room, where Max was always staring. This silhouette was unclear, just like a cold point of light moving slowly. Max continued to growl, as if he was facing an invisible enemy. "Daniel, this isn't a coincidence," Emily whispered. "There's something real here." Daniel held his wife's hand tightly, determined to protect his family at all costs. But he knows what they are about to face could change their lives forever. Daniel cannot sit still, knowing that a malicious spirit may still exist in the house. Even though he had performed the liberation ritual, he still felt like there was something unresolved. One night, Max's fierce barking woke the whole family up. Max stood in front of Sophie's door, growling as if confronting an invisible force. Daniel rushed into Sophie's room and saw a scene that made him shiver. Sophie was sitting on the bed, her eyes wide open, her body stiff. The girl muttered unintelligible words, while Max stood in front of her, growling fiercely. A cold atmosphere enveloped the room, as if all life had been sucked dry. Daniel called Sophie's name, trying to shake her awake, but she did not react. A stream of cold air ran through his back when he saw the corner of the room gradually darken, as if darkness was gathering. With no other choice, Daniel decided to immediately call Dr. Amelia Harper. Amelia arrived that night, carrying tools and research materials. She asks Daniel and Emily to leave the room so she can work, but Max refuses to leave Sophie's side. "Let Max stay," Amelia said. "I think it's Sophie's only protective bond right now." Amelia conducts a more elaborate ritual, using spells and sacred items to discover the origin of the soul. Meanwhile, Max started barking non-stop and rushed into the corner of the room, where a faint black shadow appeared. The shadow struggled, as if forced to reveal itself by some force. Amelia shouted, "Daniel, find anything in the house that could be related to the previous owner. That's the anchor to this spirit." Daniel searched the house and finally found an old box buried in the basement. Inside was a letter and a broken wooden comb that appeared to have belonged to the murder victim. Amelia immediately used them in the ritual. Max stood nearby, barking fiercely, and even jumped up and bit into the air as if to protect Sophie. As the ritual progressed, the shadow in the corner of the room became more intense, trying to cling to Sophie. A strong wind suddenly swept through the room, blowing everything away. Max jumped onto the bed, standing in front of Sophie, ready to confront the shadow. In the most tense moment, Max suddenly jumped into the corner of the room, barked loudly, and scratched the floor. A shrill screech rang out, and the shadow disappeared completely. Sophie fell onto the bed, unconscious, but her breathing returned to normal. Amelia declared, "The spirit has been exorcised. Max has saved Sophie." The next morning, Sophie woke up, confused about what had happened. She hugged Max tightly and called the dog My Knight. The Parker family decides to follow Amelia's advice and sell the house. They move to another place where they can start over. Even though they have left, the memories of the old house are still imprinted in their minds. Max becomes an indispensable part of the family, not only as a loyal dog, but also as a true protector. A few weeks after the Parker family left the house, Daniel received a letter from the new owner. This person asked about a strange detail. Every night, they heard a low growl coming from the bedroom, even though no one was in there. Daniel just smiled, caressed Max, and said, "You did well, my friend."